If you were downtown Montgomery on the night of October 4th, 2025, the air felt electric. Not tense, not dangerous. Electric. It was homecoming weekend. Multiple college games. The Alabama National Fair in full swing. Thousands of people pouring into the city, drifting from stadiums to bars, from fairgrounds to street corners. By late evening, downtown's nightlife district was packed shoulder to shoulder. Music blasting, cars inching forward, teens laughing, families heading home, students celebrating. Nothing about that night hinted at the storm that was about to hit. And then, minutes before midnight, Montgomery's heartbeat stopped. 2 people dead, 12 injured, 14 victims in seconds. And what happened inside that crowd has now become one of the most chaotic and heavily scrutinized shootings in Montgomery's recent history. Tonight, we're stripping this story down to the bare bones. This wasn't just a busy night, it was stacked. Earlier that day, Alabama State University's homecoming game ended. Tuskegee University and Morehouse College played nearby. The fair drew thousands more. Montgomery was overflowing with people, and downtown became the final stop for anyone still looking to keep the night alive. Nobody expected anything more than traffic, loud music, and long lines. But this is when tragedy hits hardest, when you feel safest. Around 11:30 p.m., in the dense crowd on Bibb Street, the first gunshots erupted. Police later said it began as a targeted shooting. One person singled out. But the moment the first shooter pulled the trigger, everything spiraled. People in the crowd, already armed, began firing back. This wasn't one shooter. This wasn't a lone gunman. This was a chain reaction. Multiple shooters exchanging fire at the same time. Chaos exploded across the street. Screams. People diving behind cars, others running straight into the line of fire without realizing it. When it stopped, the injuries stretched across a wide area. The scene looked more like a battlefield than a block of restaurants and bars. The victims, our next focus. 14 people were hit by bullets that night. 2 did not survive. Jeremiah Morris, just 17 years old, died at the scene. A teenager with his entire future ahead of him. Shalonda Rena Williams, 43, was rushed to the hospital, but died from her injuries a short time later. 12 others were shot. 5 were critically injured. 7 were under the age of 20. The youngest victim was just 16. These aren't statistics. These are families changed forever. The crime scene that didn't fit on one block. When investigators swept the area, something stood out immediately. This wasn't one weapon, not one type of bullet. Not one firing position. Shell casings from multiple guns were scattered across the area. Different calibers, different angles, different shooters. This wasn't a targeted shooting with a crowd in the background. This was multiple armed individuals firing in multiple directions across a packed crowd. It was a miracle more people weren't killed. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. 2 dead, 12 wounded, multiple shooters, no arrests. Police announced they were tracking multiple suspects, reviewing surveillance footage, and piecing together a timeline that seemed to shift by the hour. Montgomery's mayor condemned the violence. A cash reward was offered for information. But even as information trickled out, the story felt foggy, incomplete, fragile, like one wrong detail might unravel everything. Let's make something clear. We are not accusing anyone of a cover-up. We are not creating villains in the dark. What we are doing is acknowledging that something about the speed of this narrative felt off. Multiple shooters, a packed crowd, a gunfight lasting seconds, victims scattered across the street. Yet within hours, the public messaging felt simplified, as if the narrative had to be streamlined for easier digestion. It doesn't mean someone is hiding something, but it does mean the truth may be more complicated than the first headlines suggested. 6 days after the shooting, the first major break came. A juvenile was arrested, charged with capital murder, 9 counts of assault, and 3 counts of second-degree assault. Soon after, more suspects were taken into custody. Dantavius McGee, 19, charged with capital murder. Javerick Whiting, 19, charged with attempted murder. Camonte Hood, 21, charged with capital murder and 12 counts of assault. More arrests were expected, and police said from the beginning, this was not the work of one shooter. The evidence already made that clear. The working theory is this: someone was targeted. The conflict escalated. Shots were fired at the intended target, but other armed individuals in the crowd reacted instantly, some shooting at the original shooter, some trying to protect themselves, some caught in the panic. This created a deadly crossfire in seconds. People who weren't involved suddenly found themselves in the middle of a hailstorm of bullets. Behind every headline are people who will never forget that night. Families waiting in hallways, phones vibrating non-stop, doctors delivering news no parent or child should ever hear. The Montgomery community isn't made up of strangers. These people live in the same neighborhoods, attend the same schools, work at the same places. When a tragedy happens downtown, the shock doesn't stay there. It ripples outward like an earthquake. Even with arrests, even with charges, even with progress. Questions remain. Who fired the very first shots? How many shooters were active at the same time? What exactly triggered the original conflict? Which injuries came from which guns? And how many victims were hit by bullets that weren't aimed at them? Those answers matter. They matter for justice. They matter for closure. They matter because this was not random violence. It was a collision of armed individuals in a crowd already packed too tight. After the shooting, everything changed. Bars closed early, patrols increased. The city felt tense. People debated the same issues that surface every time tragedy hits. Too many guns, not enough jobs, not enough police, not enough consequences. Too many young people carrying weapons. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had an answer. Strip this story down, and here's what's left. A homecoming weekend, a packed downtown, a targeted conflict, multiple shooters, 14 victims, 2 lives lost, arrests made, a community shaken. But the full truth, the complete sequence of events, is still emerging. Some cases close like a door. This one closes like a question. Because even with suspects in custody, even with charges stacking up, the real story may be bigger, deeper, and more complicated than anyone realized. And if there's one thing we've learned, it's this: the first version of a story is never the whole story. It's just the first chapter. We will continue following this case as more details emerge, more evidence is revealed, and more threads come loose. If you want to stay on this deep dive, like and subscribe to BikyBones. We get to the bare bones, even when the truth fights back.